our research. Thanks, Christopher, for setting up the recording. We're going to jump right in, but we've got some exciting news to share with you. You might have seen a post in the PSEOC Research Community Circle asking you to submit questions for a hypothetical meeting with the US Census. But guess what, everybody? We've got that booked. So what I would encourage you to do is to, and we'll put this out into the research community so you'll have access to the link. Or maybe Christopher, you don't mind maybe copy and paste the link into the chat. But we are really thrilled to have a special and unique opportunity just for the research community to meet with Dr. Cody Orr, who is the principal at the US Census, who is in charge of the PSEOC dataset. And many of you asked Christopher and I really intelligent questions that were way, way too much in the technical weeds for us to answer. At least for me. I won't throw Christopher under that bus. For me, as a relatively new member of the PSEO Coalition. So I'm super excited that we are able to galvanize the resources of the PSEO Coalition and present you with this wonderful opportunity. So what I would like you to do is over the next week or so, if you haven't submitted a question yet to us in the circles and something you've been really wanting to know, please do so that way we can compile all those and really make that a valuable conversation. And we'll get those to Cody in advance so he can kind of think through some of his answers and be able to provide you with some real value-added experiences that the general higher education practitioner, or the general citizen for that matter, never really gets. So we hope you're excited about that. We hope that you can join us. We'll record the session just in case you can't be there, but we're hoping for as many different folks as possible to join us that day. So let's talk about what we're here to talk about today. So look at that. We've already done the welcome and the brief reintroductions in the chat. You can keep doing that. So as we talked about earlier on in the year, that this session was going to be really about getting us level set on design thinking and really how to reframe your approach to potentially data challenges. And some of you may have had some experience with design thinking. Some of you, this may be a brand new concept. It really started out in the world of marketing and really was an evolution of the focus group, if you will, for market and brand analysis. And so it's really putting some things in a different context. So we'll talk about that. And then we've saved a little bit of time, not a ton, a little bit of time at the end for some group discussion. So what we want you to begin to think about is how might you adopt this approach in your institution to begin to work on elevating specifically the PSEO data to address the challenges that you've already been thinking about. And so we'll go over some of those little sub-bullets in a second. But this is really meant to be more of a the next few moments meant to be more of a, unfortunately, you'll have to listen to me drone on. So I hope I don't bore you to tears. I hope you get something new out of this. And then just be prepared because there is a little bit of group discussion. Before I jump in, though, I want to give Christopher a chance to say hello and to share anything that he wants to share before jumping in.
Not too much to share today. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you all here again, and really appreciate your engagement within our community portal. That's a great space to share resources, ask questions, connect with each other as we're doing this work of the community of practice. And just as a plug, I think we'll have this at the end of today's session. There will be a couple of sessions at the AIR forum related to PSEO in the end of May. So kind of keep an eye out for that. We'll share some more details with you. So if you're very interested, please do attend. Jason and I will be doing a session, and then Cody Orr from US Census will also be doing another session.
So it's a real chance to even first meet Cody here and then reestablish a face-to-face bond at AIR forum. So that's really super exciting. Okay, we're going to jump right in. Thanks, Christopher. So once again, just a reminder, please, if you've not already gone in and checked, that's where we post everything. So please go do that through the member portal. If you need us to repost that link, we can do that for you. But just want to talk about the primacy of that. So jumping in. So what is design thinking? Ultimately, it's a human-centered problem-solving approach. And it really starts by trying to put yourself in the shoes of the people we serve. And so the primary difference between this and say traditional data approaches, which PS, we have a slide on that coming up, is really that it recognizes the holistic human element. And why we believe it's something we want to teach here for the PSEOC is it because it really helps you shift the lens to the decision makers. And when executed properly, it really does put an empathetic lens towards the work that we're doing. And given the PSEOC data has so many different public policy implications, having some empathy and having the ability to use a design thinking approach really will hopefully boost the data literacy of your community and create products that actually keep impact front and center, but do it in a way that really helps your user community have a better sensing. And ultimately, I would encourage you to go into the community after we post this, download it, because you could very easily take this as an established framework and just change out some of the content that I put in and put your own content in. Just please be sure to cite the PSEO Coalition, but we want you to use this as a real tool. Okay. So let's jump in. First of all, what is the critical differences between design thinking and what I would call the traditional IT approach? And I recognize that most institutional researchers live in this fuzzy middle space between functional and technical subject matter experts. And so this slide should hopefully be able to show you the compare and contrast and why we believe it's such a powerful opportunity. So design thinking truly starts with empathy for users. Now, that's not sympathy, right? Although sometimes we feel that, but really empathy. So we want to be able to put ourselves into the shoes of others. It also frames problems through their needs and not the constraints. Oftentimes when we want to put something together, we automatically jump to, but we can't do this for blank, blank, blank. Or we've already tried that 3 years ago, blank, 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 right? So it's really trying to put it into the user needs. It also uses intentional interviews, goal mapping, and observations at times to uncover pain points. So it really puts you into the center of that community to try to understand what the problem is before you begin doing solutioning. And it really is a very different way of moving as opposed to traditional agile, waterfalls, et cetera. Also, it does prioritize rapid prototyping, and it creates iterative feedback loops. And what I mean by that is you're not going to get it perfect on the first go, but you're going to build your users along in the build process. So that way you just don't hoist something on them last minute. They're actively seeing how it develops. And what that does, what I like to call it is data stickiness. It makes that product much more sticky because the folks involved actually had a chance to see it and were involved in the process of creating it. It also requires and encourages problem redefinition before final solutioning. And because how many times have we delivered a new dashboard and someone says, that's great, but it doesn't really answer the question I originally had. Or you've given me 8 views of the same data, but I'm really trying to get to this problem. By adopting a design thinking approach, you will know that on the front end. It also focuses on the need for cross-functional collaboration. You cannot do this alone. And from a data literacy perspective, the benefit of design thinking is not only do you finish up with a really strong product, but you also finish up with a product that now members of your community are going to be much more willing to use it and can evangelize it because they can say, I was involved in this process. So it's not just something that IR delivers anymore. It's something that really a strong, cohesive group of professionals have thought about and delivered. So that's the design thinking approach. And hopefully you can start to see some of the benefits already. But just in case you can't, let's talk about the traditional IT approach on the right, which usually starts off with predefined business technical requirements. And typically that is being driven from someone who may not be the end consumer of that product, right? Also, it looks at existing systems and data structures. It doesn't have that lens of how do we be entrepreneurial about this. It also relies heavily on very black and white stakeholder requests or documented specifications. And remember what I said prior, sometimes our users don't know what they need or want. And so you're almost, in essence, putting good work to potentially bad because you're not getting a comprehensive view of the problem that you're trying to solve. And many of us have experienced this in terms of linear phase gate development cycles. And sometimes getting our colleagues to do development work for us They will only be able to go so far with the resources they have. And they'll typically say, well, that's out of scope this time, or that's going to be down the road when we do version 2. Even though some of those core concepts that might have been really important, they got kicked down the road a little bit. And that could frustrate data consumers who don't have their question really answered. And then lastly, and probably most importantly, these are typically led by IT development teams with very limited iterative end user engagement. Once they get their requirements gathering document, they're off to the races. And we all know, because we've built data products before, right, or have used data products before, that sometimes in the process of building those products, you have questions that come up about how you're going to treat certain data. And sometimes not having that functional viewpoint, we have to make decisions not knowing what the user who's not present, who's not there, necessarily will need. And so I hope that this sort of frames it out for you in a way that gives you the compare and contrast between the two approaches. Does that make sense to everybody? And you can use your thumbs up, or if you have a question. If not, we'll keep going. Great. Okay, so let's jump into the actual thinking process. So step one is the what. And this is typically the things that sometimes we're most comfortable with, right? So step 1A is defining the problem, if you want to be sort of negative about it, or if you want to be more positive, what's the opportunity? So what is the opportunity you're trying to solve with outcomes data broadly across your campus? Answering the question why it's important to your users and the institution will help you start to figure out what you're trying to do and who you may need to engage going forward. Are you operating under certain assumptions? If you're familiar with qualitative research, we call this the EDIC perspective, what you bring to the table as the researcher. It's no different here in a design thinking approach. So what assumptions are you carrying with you? And then if relevant, what problems are you not intending to solve? So where are your delimitations? Where are you putting the boundaries around the problem that you're trying to fix or solve? Once you've got that defined problem set, and by the way, you want to be open to changing that problem as you engage with others, but that's your first pass. Then you want to try to think about, and this is still just on you, what is the approach you're going to take to solve the problem thus far? So how, if you were to talk to someone across campus about your initial steps in investigating this challenge, what solutions would you tell them you've already tried? And what are some solutions that you haven't even tried yet, but that you're imagining, to be able to get a sense of the scope? And then the last question for step 1, or this part 1C, is really getting down to the purpose. Notice that we differentiate and separate the opportunity from the purpose, right? So how does your product story start? And I'm giving you 3 sample questions that you would want to ask. Why should this product exist? How are you doing it? And then ultimately, what is your product, which will help you now in the next slide. So defining the problem, thinking about steps you've already taken, and then defining the product purpose is almost the non-starter. You have to do this step first. And being transparent with this write-up also serves as a wonderful introduction to when you do get to stakeholder conversations. You can share this with them as a starting point, because all of this is going to build on each other. So here's the proposed design thinking process for the what. You're going to start with 6 prompt words: for, who, the, that, unlike, and then finishing up with our product. And you'll have to trust me on this one, because it's going to feel uncomfortable at first doing this, but the more you practice it, the easier it is. And also from a development and training perspective, your teams, if you have a team, will also get used to you talking about design processes in this capacity. So the example we're giving you, and we're going to use this example for the next few slides, is we are engaging in this work for the career services directors who don't have a clear view of long-term earnings of graduates who would benefit from the PSEO data, so that they could help craft a comprehensive story of earnings potential to help guide current students, unlike having to rely on self-reported earnings 1 year out, because our product will highlight the comprehensive and validated outcomes data across the institution 1, 5, and 10. So in this process, the what is being driven ultimately by the last two words, if you really think about it. How is what you're creating going to be intentional, different, and also rooted in your user community? Make sense? Relatively straightforward once you start to get practice with it, but it matters. And once again, this question can be revisited with your stakeholders when you bring them in. All right. And you can make sure before you even start the conversation, everyone's on the same page, because we've all been in those conversations where they just feel like everyone's throwing something out to stick it against the wall. And we spend, 30 minutes before we even get down to brass tacks. So this is a really helpful framework. Any questions on this one? Seeing some head nods, no? Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about the personas. And the persona in this case may be someone that you invite to the conversation, probably should, but it can also be others who are not in the room. So in this case, I want you to think about who are the primary personas. And you want to think about what are their needs, their pain points, what are the goals, and what are their considerations that should inform your product design. So even if you can't get Tina Mirage to come to a scoping session, you might be able to get someone from Tina's staff to join you who knows Tina well enough to understand. And you can take a first stab at documenting these things. Because what we're trying to show you is that the end result, the delivery of the dashboard, is and should be tracked back to these primary personas. You should have a good understanding of the data as it's shown on the board, on your screen. Does it address the needs and challenge? Does it address the goals? And it keeps us real. And it makes sure that we don't just design for design's sake, but that we're making intentional choices about our design. So here's Tina. And I would encourage you as you go through this, you want to develop a persona response. And so that's that sentence there. I am responsible for the management of my unit and my team. I'm always at the table when conversations about alumni outcomes arise. So here's your first opportunity. I'd like one or two people to role play with me a little bit. What do you think some of the needs and challenges that Tina faces? So maybe one or two people just jump in, take off your mic, be brave, and tell me about needs or challenges that Tina might have. And maybe you know a Tina on your campus.
Programmatic outcomes, labor market outcomes.
Yep, yep. It's a challenge, right? Because they don't have that right now. Okay. Someone else? Thank you.
I would say one challenge might be um, the anecdotal evidence that program directors at a college have, where they hear about the student who's making 100,000 a year right away,
Yep.
versus the actual hard data that might be developed and how to navigate that differential.
Right. The power of the N of one story. I heard a student say, blah, 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 blah. We've all loved those N of ones, right? And these are people with PhDs who have, research experience. But the N of one, okay. Great. Okay. What are some of the goals or motivations that Tina might have for a product like this? What might motivate her to want to get on your side and build this together?
Well, if she's always at the table when conversations about alumni outcomes arise, she needs to know the data behind those outcomes.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
I also think data access, so that if it's in one place or you're building a system together, she knows where it's going to be stored and where she'll be able to access all this information in one place instead of having to reach around campus to go to all the different stakeholders involved.
Yeah, she's probably frustrated by having to go to each and every dean and each and every program director, right, to have those conversations. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Now, how do you think we can help her?
So I was going to build off the goals and motivations, just commenting that there's also kind of a self-advocacy element and wanting to be able to report on the work her team's doing and how that's potentially related to changes in outcomes. And so to feed that into how we can help her, I think, a provider of data and also kind of situating the data within its limitations are
Yeah,
sort of two of the ways. So being helping her in the sense making, and then also kind of the caveats and limitations that come with data from like a PSEO or other tools.
perfect. Thanks. Okay, so once you've got your primary, and by the way, there could be multiple, there could be multiple primaries. So we use this process to create an engagement data dashboard once at my prior institution. And so several of the primary personas, one was obviously the vice president for student affairs, and the other one was the dean of students. And so those were our two primary personas. But there's also secondary personas. And so these might be people who are not necessarily your ideal user, but maybe will also find value or use in the product or service. Most of their needs you'll cover already with your primary persona, but you still want to look at those secondary needs just to make sure you're not missing the forest through the trees. And there might be some quick little additions that you can do to your design process to make it more sticky for more people. So here we've got Martin made up. Notice the Mirage and made up, right? Yep. He is our career services advisor, and he is specifically housed within the College of Liberal Arts. And so his persona statement is, I help guide my students to prepare themselves for internships and postgraduate employment. I field many questions about career trajectories and potential earnings potential. So once again, now put yourself in Martin's mindset. What are some of his needs or challenges?
One challenge might be liberal arts is a pretty broad area. It doesn't necessarily map really well sometimes to particular jobs.
Yep. Yep. Thanks, Bob. Someone else?
He may also want to compare to the other colleges or schools around campus. And if he only knows the outcomes of his students and he wants to put it in perspective of the rest of the institution, he may not have that information currently available. I'll have to go around and find it.
Yeah, it's like it's a blind spot, right? It's an institutional blind spot. And I've literally have heard of people like Facebook scraping or Facebook stalking to get data, or leveraging alumni when you're out surveys, all with challenges, right? So yeah, what might be some of his goals and motivations? They're probably different than our prior person.
One goal with all the talk about the financial value transparency and the gainful all that kind of thing, it might be one of his goals is to defend the value of a liberal arts degree showing wage outcomes compared to the cost. I mean, that could be literally a job saving kind of a motivation on this.
Yeah, definitely. Anita, I think you had your mic off for a second.
Yeah, I was thinking on similar lines that various, as in his whole attempt to find data sources wherein he can align his students well with internship opportunities.
Yeah, perfect. And notice here that the prior person was really alumni focused, or sort of like the administrative compliance or trying to get these data. This is really focused on helping students, right? And so it's a squarely different sort of look and feel. How do you think we might be able to help Martin or other advisors across the institution?
If I can say anything about Martin, we are assuming too much that he knows what data are available, and these people are not data people. They don't know what they need when they confront with the question. Then they realize what exactly is happening. Right. So how can we help? I think it all depends with what kind of situations he's dealing on the daily basis, what exactly students are looking for, what kind of internships are available, what kind of alumni connections for postgraduate employment is available out there. Mm-hmm. I don't think he will focus directly to the earnings. He'll focus first to the opportunity to find them something so they can get engaged and train for interviews, train for resumes, do these kind of things. So just assuming that he knows what we know, it's a little bit of issue.
And it's not an issue if you involve people like Martin in the design process. Now, if we leave Martin off to the side and just go and do our requirements without Martin's perspective, yes, that's the very dangerous thing. And by the way, when you're discussing these personas, you don't necessarily have to have a real person at your institution. You can make up someone that does the similar task and then have other people in the room who are actually advisors say, well, from my lived experience, this is what, and so you're kind of getting there, but you're letting them not have to say I need or I want, but rather this is what would benefit the institution. This is what benefit others like me. So it's a very powerful technique, but you guys did a great job on that. Thank you. Fantastic, fantastic. Then we get into the why, and the why is important. And by the way, the why, you want to involve your stakeholders in this conversation, just like the prior one. So what you're trying to do here is really nail down, what does success look like? What are the metrics you're intending to move, and quantifying those metrics, and then explaining why those metrics are not important. So once again, you can come through with a few goals that you might have and present those to your design thinking small group of people for validation. Or you could go and just not start any process and just say, what are our goals? Obviously, giving them some breadcrumbing, kind of like I'm doing right here for you all today, is a helpful way to start those conversations. And the goal needs to be rooted in the product and the tool and the dashboard, right? Because that's what we're building towards. And then clearly, you also want to think, if it goes well, how do you envision that tool in the future too? So you're not saying this is a one and done, unlike our prior compare and contrast with the traditional IT approach. You're in essence already telling them we're going to have an iterative process here, and we're going to have a cadence, if you will. So number one goal that I kind of thought through is we're going to surface reliable outcomes information to campus users, right? Any good product that we develop should be able to meet that goal. Now, I get it. Reliable has a little asterisk. There's lots of different ways to interpret reliable, but at least it will be reliable in terms of the fact that we are going to think about how we define it and present it to individuals. Goal two, we're going to equip the career services team with trusted data. And that trust word is so important. That is well-defined and understandable. So we're making a pledge that anything we build is going to clearly have a documentation and definition trail in it. What might be some other goals that you could think a product like this could help achieve? Go for it, Ryan.
I I think I think a lot of people I work with, they just need to know what to say. If I give them a data dump, not everyone likes data. Not everyone knows really how to work it. If I just give them a bunch of data and assume that magic will happen, and then they're talking with parents and students, and so a lot of them they just say, just tell me what I need to say. That students are going to be okay if they major in philosophy. That I can back up the claim that you can major in psychology and you're going to be fine. And so I think messaging
Yep.
is something that just knowing what to say
Yep.
is
And,
helpful.
and a great product tip that we often used is putting questions at the top of the opening screen. These are the following questions that you will be able to answer, and giving some sample answers in a way that we as designers and subject matter experts feel comfortable with. So yes, so a goal might be that this product will provide individuals with the language needed to interpret the data. Great goal. Okay, one more. Thanks, Ron.
I've got one, and maybe it's a little selfish, but I would love to have a tool that people can look to and trust and know that it's like sort of we recommend using it so that it takes some of the work off of my small but mighty team.
Sure.
So it's kind of like just displacing the workload a little bit, knowing that these data are reliable, it's easy to use, that would be great.
So Buffy, that's great. So maybe reframing that so that the product will be intuitive enough that a general person can navigate and answer the question that they need to answer.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not just mind dump of 50 charts on one screen. And, we've all seen messy design, right? But it makes sense. And once again, you're gathering that insight, that information from the previous steps.
Mm-hmm.
Great job. Okay. So here's a screen that might help you with defining those success metrics. And the success metrics is really step sort of like YB. So YA was the previous screen. This is YB. How are you going to move it? And so what does your institution need? If everything, how do you make it go forward? So the metrics, this is where you're starting to now document, and you might be able to start to think about this as minimum viable requirements, right? What are those things that the product has to have? So metric 1, 5, and 10 years outcome data surfaced. Metric 2, data contains breakdowns by 2 and 4 digit SIP. What are some other metrics? You all have seen the PSEO data now, so you've got a good sense of it. What are some other metrics we might want to throw out?
Retention in state.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Retention in state, or
okay,
how
yep.
many go out state.
Okay, yep. The geographic flow data, great. One more?
Yeah, I was also about to say the same thing, the mobility data. Yeah.
Mobility, okay.
Yeah.
Great. So you can see by having a facilitated conversation now, wonderful. We're going through this very fast. This entire process takes about 90 minutes to go through with your stakeholders, depending on how verbose they are. But you could see you would generate a pretty long, comprehensive list of those metrics, right? Okay. Then we're getting, so we've got the what, we've got the who, we've got the why. Now we're in the how. And so this is where we start to talk about requirement gathering. Notice how fundamentally flipped this is, right? From the normal process, we start off with requirements, right? Now we're actually saying we just are now getting to requirements. And so if you were to envision, and the prompt that I'm giving you here is the exact same prompt you would use with your campus community, what would you envision in a new PSEO outcomes data model? What features would be needed for the potential visualization? Then from a technical perspective, assuming you've got some IT representation in the room or a data model in the room, what are the needs for the data export? And then how will institutional SMEs be involved in helping to test the model? So it's not the people in the room who are going to test, although they probably will help you test, but it's also others. Once again, getting another cast of the net to a further group of individuals that you can build consensus around. And so requirements are, I think this is probably the step we're all most comfortable with because this is what we do a lot. But requirement 1, it's got to include obviously our institution and others we identify as peers. So that would be my 1 minimum requirement. Number 2, it has to be easy to navigate for non-technical users with very clear controls. A little bit of the previous on metrics, but this is now really a requirement. Someone want to volunteer? We don't have to do all of them, but someone want to volunteer another requirement?
I would say one other requirement is we have to be able to slice the data so that it matches our programs to some degree. For example, right now, allied health is all lumped together. So in our case, we can't get PTA or OT. We're a community college. We can't get some of the subsets. And I know some of that might be because of the numbers and things like that, data suppression.
Right.
But that would be a desired outcome to really get into a granular level that matches what we do at our college.
Yep. And that may be something that we're that sounds like a great question also for Cody, right? What's the future of the PSEO look like and where is it going? Yeah, totally. Perfect. And then the bottom one is, who else on campus are you willing to trust with the process of being a tester? And whenever we have done this in my past, we've always made it a really big deal. And we've always thanked those testers with, and not everyone has budget, I get it. But sometimes we would send them a small thing of candy, or if we had a good deal on institutional coffee mugs, we'd fill up a coffee mug with a hot chocolate with a little thank you note. It doesn't have to be something big, but it's how do you build that, wow, they appreciated me for my time. And also in the testing, and this is where I was telling you about the monitoring in the very first part, in the testing phase, ideally, you would want to be there watching, and you would want them to talk through the decision making that they are making with your product. You want to try to have them verbalize their strategic thought process around how they're engaging with the tool. That is going to provide you the most valuable feedback. You can ask guided questions like, what did you notice first on the screen? Which graph looks the easiest to use for yourself? Why did you choose to do this or that? That iterative observation goes a long way in being able to provide a final product that really allows you to make sure that you're in tune with your user needs. And frankly, it's something that you could never do really following a traditional IT approach where we birth something and it goes out into the ether, and then all we have done in essence is created grounds for people to complain about something, right? Because your testers, if they feel like they're your allies in this process, they will also be transparent, but also be transparent with you in a way that doesn't come across as attacking or defensive, right? It's really genuine feedback. That process is really key. And this is where, the design thinking approach, that human empathetic perspective, sounds touchy-feely. I get it. Not all of us are touchy-feely, but it really does matter because you're able to link the heart and the mind together in the design process. Okay, perfect. All right, the next phase, and we're getting close to the end here, so thanks for sticking with me. The next phase is really important, and you want to do this transparently as a group in your conversation. You want to basically put 2 pieces of paper or 2 sections of a whiteboard up on the wall, and you and the group together make decisions around what is going to be included amongst all the requirements that you previously came up with and what's going to be excluded. Okay. And the important piece here is you've got to be able to explain explicitly why the group decided not to do something. And you want to document that. That documentation then, and you see my example here, we should not ingest any out-of-state peer data at this time until first we build competency with in-state data. The point of that is we want to be able to show others when we present this initial product into the community for testing that where are the boundary lines. Otherwise, you might confuse your testers and potentially even your open community membership about the product. Also, what's really important about this is you want somewhere in your product, either an endnote or another screen, to talk about exclusions and next steps. And what that does is it will build confidence in your team and yourself and your design process with your end stage users to know where you're going with this product. And it will head off some of the complaints or concerns that typically arise. Now, hopefully and ideally, many of those low-level concerns you've already addressed because you've involved people in your design process. But what I love about the exclusion statement is it says, yes, we've thought that through, and this is our decision. And it gives you that springboard then, so that when you come back in this iterative process and you start again with the next version of it, you just don't jump into the requirements. You jump into the exclusions first. And then you look and reorder the priorities of those exclusions. So it's a little bit of a different process, right? So requirement. I put as an example, must be able to show the 25th and 75th percentiles for context. I don't know if necessarily we have to go through and I'll ask you what's in and what's out, but if anyone has ideas, I'm obviously fine with someone jumping in and sharing. Maybe what's more important is the exclusion side. What is something that you would want to exclude right away from the first product for yourself to create on your campus? Knowing what you know. Everyone's either really tired or this is a tough one.
I think it's tough because we want to include everything.
Right. That's a great, exactly. But the reality is there's only so much time. and there's only so much attention span, right?
I'll say I would probably this I don't know if this sounds good or bad, but I would probably exclude like programs where we kind of know the answer. Like we all know business majors earn the most, that they have these outcomes. Nursing, no offense against any of those programs, but we have at least my institution we have a good sense. But the real problem is for us is like liberal arts programs or helping us define programs where you don't follow a trajectory. Like you can major in art and work in data.
Sure,
Those are the things I think at my institution, at least, we would like to focus on, and as opposed to just kind of answering the obvious,
sure.
you know.
Yeah. And that might be fine for a first draft just until your institution gains competency, right? Once again, because you're right, start with something a little sticky. I've seen both approaches work. I've seen people start with something that's known and well established because it's faster time to delivery. But I've also seen people say, hey, if I can lift 80% of the questions out in the first pass, I'm going to do that. So yeah, but the exclusion piece is really important. And it's definitely something to think about. Okay, the next step, I'm not gonna ask you for some feedback on this one, but I wanted to show you some examples of an iterative process. And what I would encourage you to do is to separate your technical timeline from your functional timeline. Oftentimes we just put those together, but really think specifically about the discrete mile markers that you're going to need. And if weeks are too aggressive, you could use months, that's fine. Or some people, it's even semesters, right? Just given everything else on our plates. The timing doesn't necessarily matter, but what you decide to do in those timing intervals does matter. And I think the important piece here is notice on the last piece, it's revise and repeat feedback until launch, right? For the technical. And on the functional, it's revise and repeat feedback until launch. It's the same. So depending on who you're working with in your given data product, this design thinking approach really matters because it creates this iterative feedback loop. And you'll see the differences between how you make decisions from a technical perspective, from a functional perspective. And this is just that beginning step. After this, you're going to have to use more additional testing and buy-in. So I think what's important here is what we're sharing with you may be viewed on the surface as a bit more time intensive on the front end, and we understand that. But hopefully, you're investing that time on the front end so that way, A, your actual product is improved, and B, it's less time trying to put out all the fires from all the different needs that your campus may have that you didn't think of. And so it's a give and take process here. I would encourage you to try this out. See if it's something that you can adopt, and you might be pleasantly surprised at the allyships and the partnerships that form as a result of this process. Because fundamentally, it's no longer just about the data, it's about how people use that data. And that is the fundamental difference. And it's something why we feel like it will enable the PSEO data to be much more sticky, even with all of its limitations, even with some of the challenges associated with it. But at least you will bring your community aboard in the conversation about PSEO data in a way that's very different, and I think someone on the call already said, than just giving people bunches of data and expecting them to do something with it. So that's design thinking in a nutshell. And I hope that you feel like there's some value here. In future sessions, we're probably going to come back and revisit some of the fundamentals here, but we may take a different perspective. So like next time we do this, maybe in the fall, we might focus on the president or the VP provost. So you're going to see that those conversations are still there, but we're going to adapt who we're thinking about and how we're actually doing it. Okay. So look at that, 145. What a deal. So
Jason,
let's take
it
the
looks
next
like
10
we have a
minutes or
question
so.
from Jay.
Sorry?
It looks like we have a question from
Yeah,
Jay.
go ahead, Jay.
Real quick, Jason, this is great. I really appreciate you sharing this with us. And
Sure.
just, this is the kind of thing we're kind of drinking from a fire hose right now, scribbling down a lot of notes. Do you have other, besides the slide deck that we could get access to, do you know of other like how-to guides on design thinking that would be good kind of tutorials that not like volumes, but short, concise, brief?
Thank you for that. Yes, this is there's entire graduate level semester long courses in colleges of visual arts and design on the concept of design thinking. Just put that out there. First of all, yes, we could probably pull something together. I can ask my buddy chat and myself, we could probably work something out to give you something a little bit more standard to follow. But also, I have found that my biggest ally in this process at my last institution was our dean for our College of Visual Arts. And if you don't have a College of Visual Arts on campus, you might have a design program or faculty who teach in design. And it's a great opportunity to make a new connection with an academic unit for some guidance. And they may also have some resources. I didn't find a whole lot out there that I felt like was really consumable and gave you a good way to start. But we'll definitely try to promise as a follow-up, get you something that we can create as a resource for you. Awesome. Christopher's going to have to hold that to me now. So
Sorry to interrupt. I'm not a design thinking expert by any means, but I found this student affairs book. It was called Design Thinking Student Affairs. I thought it was good for higher
okay,
ed, but I can't judge its utility,
sure.
or quality, but
Sure.
I
And
liked it.
design thinking and storytelling are uniquely linked. They're separate, but there's also a great book called Storytelling with Data. And I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but it's really fantastic. And it'll have similar flavors, but not necessarily a pure science of design thinking approach.
I'm also not an expert, but I did do a certification course in it at a conference a couple years ago, and Academic Impressions also has a course. So if your institution is a member, I can give you I'll drop it in the chat.
Perfect.
Works. Yep.
Yeah, or even better, don't drop it in a chat. Post it on the community, so that way and in fact, this will be great. If you have something that you have found to be helpful in design thinking approach or storytelling with data, pop it into the portal. Let's use that portal as a good place to collect that stuff. Great. Any last questions? But yes, you're right. Thank you. It is drinking from a fire hose. But you'll be surprised once you get bit by this bug. Going back to my fire ant comment before, it really does stick. I mean, it's really an interesting way of thinking about product design. And I will say, for my team of developers, it was hard to get them to think this way at first because they're so used to just sitting down and with a set of requirements and designing. And what I shared with them is it's going to take a little bit longer because you're involving people, but you will find that the product will be used. And sure enough, it really made an impact on the end usage.
Jason, I have a question.
Sure.
Since you have been applying this design thinking process, institutions, the majority of institutions have very small IR offices, and they are very limited time and personnel to do all these 14 steps, let's say. Do you have a recommendation in a sense how many steps is realistic actually to have in the situation of IR of today?
Sure.
And all the time, like the limited capacity and all that?
Sure. Well, I think first of all of us would pretty much automatically start with a timeline, right? We all work from timelines. So that's one process you obviously would have. You could attempt to do the personas without involving your campus partners, but I would be careful in that. But I think you've got to at least have the what you need, what is the product, the why, and if you could think through your who, that would be great. I've also seen it work really well if you have a data summit on your campus once a year, or a data workshop that you could partner with HR to get people to come. That's another good place for this because people are already there, and you could have multiple conversations happening on table topics. This doesn't have to be discrete and one topic only. You could have a design day where you literally bring stakeholders together and ask them to help you think about the requirements. The other piece too is, I think this is really where artificial intelligence and natural language processing could also help us be more efficient. You could utilize those tools and technologies to synthesize the conversations and the results of the conversations to help you get to end goal faster. Obviously, member check, do due diligence, and document your usage of those tools. But I do think that this is a unique opportunity, especially with more and more verbal note-taking AI tools coming on, where you can just literally hit record and it'll plug and then synthesize at the end for you. So I think that's another piece to do. The other piece too is maybe pick something that doesn't require, maybe don't try to dive in with the entire PSEO data set. maybe do a little something first where we talk about just limiting the data down to maybe one domain to start. So one college or one department, just get your feet underneath you. But I do understand the challenges of a small IR shop. A one-person IR shop has a lot of plates spinning at the same time. So I would say think about technology and think about partnerships. That'll help you. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Christopher.
Yeah, just to add a comment to that, I think, Mariana, your question is very well taken, or your comment. Many of us have worked with small staff, and I think this kind of approach, one of the benefits actually is it shines a positive light on your IR office in terms of what they could potentially do and why we're different as IR/IE professionals compared to your IT shop, who are critical partners, but we're going to approach the work very differently because we're directly connected to how the data are being used in practice, as opposed to just building a tool and putting it out there. So it can sometimes be a way to actually elevate your profile on campus, which, of course, as more work comes your way, can help you advocate for additional staff, technology, resources, things like that. It doesn't always work out that way. Depends on your campus and your constraints, but I've definitely had that positive experience to help grow my team and our operations.
Yeah. The other piece that I would add too, this is oftentimes we don't think about students this way, but this is a wonderful opportunity for seniors in your arts programs to volunteer because they're looking for opportunities to improve their resume. So you can involve them, and because this is mostly non-technical, this is pretty much a lot of facilitated conversation. You could literally train up a grad assistant or a senior and spin them off, and you do the introduction and you get back to work and come back in for the final. I've seen this work lots of different ways. So don't let the scale of it truly sort of stop you from trying it. In other words, there's lots of unique and creative approaches that you can employ. I hope I answered the question. And thank you,
Yes,
Christopher.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. So what do y'all think? We identified the small shop challenge. Yes, that's true. Other thoughts? And you don't have to answer my bullet points there if you have other thoughts or other comments.
I was wondering the challenges that one might face in terms of how extensive the whole process is. So did you or did any one of you face any kind of those challenges, and how did you all kind of mitigate that? Because there are most times we have to kind of respond to questions or queries, and the turnaround time is really small.
Yeah, for us, what we did is we gave a 6-week notice that we were going to hold a 90-minute meeting, and we literally held to 90 minutes. And so we gave times for each of these blocks, and I used a stoplight sort of PowerPoint where basically I just made a pseudo stoplight, green for like 10 minutes, red, yellow for 2 minutes, and red for stop. And so I think as long as you tell your participants that we have 90 minutes, we respect your time, we will get through this. You will be surprised once you norm everyone. And we sent along in advance like a small write-up of what is design thinking. So they came primed. They knew. And in fact, they were very excited to be there. That was just our experience.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know if others have done this yet.
Yeah, I've run a couple of them here at MSU Denver, and we pack the rooms. People want to be involved, and they've heard about the first one we did. They're like, "This sounds awesome. We need to do this," and people show up and they really get into it. And we use tactiles, like we bring Play-Doh and make prototypes, and it's really fun and to run and to be a part of. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, Buffy, you're right. I can tell you this will be the highlight of their day.
Yeah.
Potentially their week. Because think about it, who doesn't want to be heard? Right? Especially if they're frustrated. Who doesn't want to have a forum to be able to be constructive and really focus on solving institutional problems that matter to students? That's why we all got into this work anyway. There's only so much time for U.S. News and World Report, right? I mean, there's always more time to spend on Pell, on iPads, right? But in this case, doing this kind of work, you'll find it might even be the highlight of your week as a facilitator. And here's the other benefit that Christopher and Buffy just talked about. It humanizes the work that IR does. We're oftentimes stereotyped as just being data people. this humanizes that work. So yeah.
Jason, I have a question following up this. I always find that this human-centered design kind of pummels the research design, in a way, to use that specific word. But you know what I mean?
I do.
Because a lot of people from outside who have no idea what's data, how to consume it, how to process it, they come with huge and sometimes extraordinary ideas and kind of goes totally against research design. So how
Sure.
exactly do you balance this?
Well, I think first of all, a analytic product development cycle like this is very different than answering a quantitative question through traditional quantitative means. This is much more qualitative in many ways because you're involving the community in the solutioning and in the identification of the challenge. So in some ways, it's like the age-old debate of who's right or wrong, quantitative or qualitative. I like both, right? I'm a mixed methods guy, except for dissertation. Stay away from that for a million reasons, because you'll never do one really great and you'll be in like dissertation hell. At least that's what I told my grad students. So I would say from a qualitative perspective, it's also how you frame it. And if you have some of those people who you've invited, now obviously you want to invite folks that you already have somewhat of a working relationship with. You're going to have some folks there that you've already maybe had some conversations with, or you've done some work for them before. So it's not a cold relationship. So hopefully you won't have some of those surprise ideas, but that's why the exclusions and inclusions section is so important. Someone can raise something, you should document it for sure, but then you can come back to it when the exclusion category happens. Great. Okay, lots more. I would encourage you to use the form if you have additional questions or observations. Please post those resources. We just have a few more slides in the last few moments, so thanks for your attention. Don't forget about, we're hoping that you can give us a 1 to 2 page white paper on a use case that you've done somehow this year using the PSEO data. It doesn't have to be a Nobel Peace Prize winning work product. It doesn't have to be Charles Dickens' best of times, worst of times. Just give us something that you've used. We want to showcase your work and highlight the opportunities that the PSEO data has. And so obviously don't forget about that. And then lastly, notice now that this was done before I finished and updated the presentation just before. Next meeting is on June 11th, and Christopher is going to be your instructor that day. Christopher is really our methodology guru on the PSEOC. He's very modest, but he is going to do a session for you on sort of a methodological session. So hopefully that in combination with Dr. Cody Orr's session should really help you get a good, strong foothold. And then surprising, I can't believe I'm saying this, but next August 13th, the fall term, is our meeting 3. And so topic to be determined. It might come out based off the conversations we have with Cody and Christopher. It might be a return to design thinking, hopefully not so much as a drinking from the fire hose. Maybe we can deconstruct this one section, but we'll talk about that with you. Any questions from the room before we exit? Okay. Please continue to work on that stuff, and then consider leveraging LinkedIn. Our marketing team at the PSEOC has created the following for you. And so feel free to take a screenshot of that if you want to post that to your LinkedIn. This is sort of your official PSEO research community of practice badge, if you will. If you want to talk with others on LinkedIn about the work you're doing here with the PSEO data, don't have to, of course, but we at least wanted to get that to you. And just want to say thank you so much for attending today's session. Hopefully you found it valuable, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Christopher, final words?
No, I think just a big thank you to you for sharing your experience and knowledge with us today. This is so fantastic for those of us in the IR/IE space to learn about a very great perspective on design.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for your patience in sticking with me, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Hopefully I'll see many of you, if not all of you, at Dr. Cody Orr. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks.